Hey guys, tonight we take a stroll, more like a sweltering stumble, through the hot, noisy, deeply confusing world of ancient Babylon. Imagine waking up barefoot in the middle of a giant mud-brick metropolis around 1750 BCE, with the sun already roasting your scalp and no idea where the latrine is. You're surrounded by towering ziggurats, shouting vendors, temple guards, and gods whose names you can't pronounce, but whose wrath you'll probably attract before lunch. No phones, no Google Translate, no sunscreen, and surprise, this city doesn't come with a welcome guide. You're not in Kansas anymore, or even ancient Egypt. You're in the original Megacity home to Hammurabi, 300 deities, and the earliest recorded traffic laws. Unfortunately, you're not exactly welcome. The locals think you look weird. You think they look weird. But they've got spears, and you've got sandals that don't fit. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in dust, not sand, not dirt dust, the fine, chalky kind that gets into your ears and throat and makes your eyes itch. The air is already heavy with heat, and there's a strange, earthy smell that's not exactly unpleasant, just different. You blink at a sun that's way too bright for this early in the day. Welcome to Babylon. Around you, the world pulses with sound. Wooden wheels clattering, donkeys braying, women haggling, children screeching in what must be the earliest known version of tag. There's shouting, always shouting, and, somewhere nearby, a distant metallic clang as someone hammers copper into shape. The walls rise up around you, made from baked mud bricks, baked again by the pitiless sun. They stretch so high and so wide, it's easy to see why people called this place a wonder. But you're not here to sightsee, you're here to survive. A cart nearly clips your elbow as it lurches past. The driver curses in Akkadian, which you don't speak, but the tone is universal. Get out of the way, idiot. You jump back, landing in a puddle of warm, suspicious liquid. It's either laundry runoff or goat urine. Honestly, both are possible. The streets are already crowded, and your stomach's already turning. Not from hunger yet. The heat, the noise, the smell. This is no peaceful village with gentle harp music playing in the background. Babylon is a city bustling with 200,000 people, give or take. That's like ancient Times Square, but with more livestock. And no one knows who you are, which is a problem. Because in Babylon, who you are matters more than just about anything. Are you a freeman, a slave, a merchant, a temple servant, an outsider without an identity or patronage? That last one gets you the fewest rights and the most glares. Guess which one you are. You try to blend in, but it's not working. Your tunic is slightly too short, your walk too unsure, your gaze too curious. Locals pass by in neatly arranged garments made of linen or wool, often scented with oil or resin. You, meanwhile, smell like someone who just time-traveled without deodorant. A teenager selling figs eyes you warily. You smile. He does not. He shouts something in Akkadians, something about a stranger and the gods. Maybe he's just saying hello. Or maybe he's accusing you of being a demon in human form. Honestly, in Babylon, both are possible. Historians still argue whether Babylon was as intolerant of strangers as later texts imply, or whether foreign travelers were more welcome in practice than law. But from where you standing ankle-deep in mystery puddle there's not a lot of hospitality going round. You duck into the shade of a mud brick awning, hoping to catch your breath. Big mistake. You've just stepped into the entrance of a household shrine. A woman sees you, gasps, and throws a handful of barley at your chest. Maybe an exorcism, maybe a bribe to get you out. Either way, you're now lightly dusted with grain. You apologize, bow, and back away, probably not in the correct cultural fashion. The woman glares as you retreat, muttering about omens. This is your first lesson in Babylonian etiquette. Don't assume anything is public space. That step you just leaned against, that might be sacred ground. That random stone could be a god's symbol. That dog, definitely cursed. You wandered toward the city center, drawn by the hum of voices and the faint smell of cooking. Along the way, you pass signs of a highly advanced society, potters at work, scribes etching characters onto clay tablets, vendors measuring grain with bronze weights calibrated down to tiny fractions. Babylonian math, by the way, used base 60-60. That's why we still divide an hour into 60 minutes today. It's logically if you're trained in it, you are not. So when you glance at a sundial and try to figure out if it's noon or divine appointment o'clock, you fail spectacularly. You pass a tall wall covered in glazed blue bricks depicting lions and dragons. You found the Ishtar Gate. It's beautiful, towering, awe-inspiring, and flanked by guards in bronze helmets who look like they haven't blinked since sunrise. You try to avoid eye contact. You fail again. One of them steps forward. Your name, he barks. You freeze. Say something, anything. But all that comes out is a sad ochak. The guard narrows his eyes. What district are you from? You say, again, which is apparently not a recognized Babylonian neighborhood. You're now being escorted away, not arrested, but definitely not invited to brunch. Welcome to the reality of ancient surveillance. Babylon had a complex administrative structure. The king knew everything, or at least someone in his giant bureaucracy did. Nothing happened in this city without someone recording it on clay. And you, friend, are very much unrecorded. By the time they let you go with a warning thanks only to a bored temple scribe who waves you off as a dumb peasant from the south, you, re-sweating, exhausted, and only 30 minutes into your day, you're already in over your head. And you haven't even tried to eat yet. You're hungry, and that fig boy definitely isn't sharing. So you follow the smoky scent of roasting grain and simmering stew into a narrow side alley, well, more of a sun-baked slot between two mud-brick buildings where people cook, talk, and occasionally throw their dishwater out the window without warning. You dodge a splash and mutter something that sounds suspiciously modern under your breath. Babylon, at its peak, is dazzling. Literally, the walls shimmer with sun-reflected glaze, and the canals snake-like, glittering veins through the city. But the glamour ends where the street begins. Because the truth is, for all its grandeur, this place stinks. Let us not romanticize it. Ancient Babylon smells like a marketplace, married a livestock pen, and had a garbage fire for a honeymoon. The fragrance is a pungent mix of unwashed bodies, animal droppings, damp straw, overripe fruit, incense, smoke, and dried fish left out just a bit too long. You catch yourself gagging. and a woman nearby clicks her tongue at you apparently. Dramatic retching is not fashionable here. A passing child, barefoot and grinning, offers you what appears to be a chunk of roasted turnip on a stick. You thank him awkwardly and take a bite. It's earthy and chewy and possibly not turnip at all. But beggars, especially anachronistic time-traveling ones, can't be choosers. You move with the crowd now, navigating a landscape of clay walls and reed awnings. Somewhere, a man with a booming voice praises the healing power of boiled beetroot. You make a mental note to avoid his services at all costs. And then you step in it. A squelch, a slide, and a slow-motion realization that what your sandal just found is neither mud nor pudding. You freeze. There's a beat of silence, and then the laughter starts. A group of boys perched on a low wall howl with delight at your misfortune. One actually claps. Another points and imitates your horrified face. You force a grin. Classic, you mutter. Babylon had no sewers as we know them. Waste ran along open channels or was dumped into pits. These facilities overflowed during rains, attracting flies, rats, and other little surprises. Historians still argue whether elite neighborhoods maintained better sanitation or if it was just a universal mess. Either way, your sandal is now officially retired. You limp on, trying to scrape your foot clean against a stone. It's not very effective. As you turn a corner into what looks like a public square, you get your first glimpse of something beautiful. A broad, open space, dotted with market stalls, fruit pyramids, pottery displays, and flapping linen awnings. Bright colors, loud voices, traders arguing cheerfully over fish, and dates. It's the heartbeat of the city. And yet, even here, the smell persists. Like a warm shawl of humanity draped over everything. You wander through the stalls, trying not to make eye contact with the vendors, who immediately start calling out prices and thrusting goods in your face. One woman tries to sell you fermented goat milk. Another, a chunk of dried lizard. A third offers what appears to be a rabbit, but it has way too many legs. You pretend to be deeply interested in a basket of beans, just to avoid conversation. There's no such thing as window shopping here. If you pause, you buy. If you don't buy, they assume you're either poor or suspicious, or both, and being either can get you into trouble. A tall man wearing a linen headdress eyes you curiously. He's selling what might be beer. Babylonian beer was thick, grainy, and often drunk through a straw to avoid the floating sediment. You smile politely, then trip over a goat. The goat survives. Your pride does not. You stagger upright and find yourself eye to eye with a priest. You can tell because he's got a distinctive beard, carefully oiled and curled, and he's flanked by two assistants who carry incense and scrolls. His eyes narrow. He doesn't recognize you, which means you might be a criminal, or worse, an outsider, pretending to be a local. You stammer something vaguely reverent about the gods. He raises an eyebrow and moves on. You exhale slowly and retreat toward a quieter alley, where the smell is somehow worse, but at least no one's looking at you. By now, you're sweating so much you might be 60% water vapor. Your tunic clings to your back, and the air tastes like clay and boiled onions. You find a wall, sit down on the edge of a dry trough, and breathe. Here's the part no one tells you. Civilization is noisy. Babylon was likely one of the loudest cities in the ancient world, with its shouting merchants, roaring fires, ringing hammers, chanting priests. An occasional drunken flutist. Silence is a rare and valuable commodity. You lean your head back, trying to process it all. Just this morning, you were imagining temples and gardens and hanging wonders. Now you're mostly imagining a bath and a cold drink, possibly a tetanus shot. And then, like a gift from Marduk himself, a breeze wafts through the alley carrying the scent of rose oil, cinnamon, and waities, that frankincense. You sit up. A woman walks past, veiled, carrying a small pot of steaming water. She glances at you briefly, then disappears into a curtained doorway. Her scent lingers. It's a small moment, but it reminds you Babylon wasn't all mud and sweat. It had beauty, luxury, even magic. Scented oils, exotic spices, elaborate perfumes, they all existed here. The elite bathed regularly, scented their clothes, and hired specialists to prepare their skin for temple ceremonies. Of course, that life isn't for you. Not today. You're a stranger, a wanderer, and probably violating a dozen city ordinances just by existing without registration. But you're also learning, slowly. Still, one thing is certain. Your nose may never recover. And it's barely mid-morning. You think you've got your bearings until a cart barrels past and nearly clips your hip again. This time it's piled high with clay jars, and the driver is shouting something that definitely isn't, "Excuse me." You leap out of the way, land awkwardly on a loose paving stone, and twist your ankle ever so slightly. Not enough to limp, just enough to regret being born with ankles. The streets of Babylon weren't designed for people like Umaning, clueless tourists with no idea where they're going and a vague hope that things will magically improve. These roads are winding, narrow, chaotic, and alive. They're not arranged in any grid or order you'd recognize. Instead, they snake and zigzag, following ancient paths and canal routes, lined with sun-baked mud brick buildings that loom tall and boxy, their windows like empty eyes watching your every move. You quickly realize that sidewalks don't exist. Pedestrians share the same road as donkeys, carts, loose dogs, kids playing with sticks, vendors pushing pushcarts, and men transporting giant slabs of stone on sleds that screech like banshees dragged across the underworld. It's like a giant, citywide obstacle course, except the obstacles yell at you and spit when they're annoyed. You dodge one merchant who's hawking what he claims is the best copper in all Sumer, and another who's loudly slapping a fish against a stone slab for reasons unclear. Someone tries to press a bundle of herbs into your hand. Another yells "foreigner" and spits at your feet. Charming, suddenly, a man, maybe a porter or slave, shoulders into you. Hard, you stumble. He doesn't even turn round, just keeps walking. You start to say something, but then think better of it. This is not the place to escalate things. And speaking of escalation, there's a commotion up ahead. People are shouting. Not the usual market chatter. This is sharp, tense, confrontational. You creep forward just enough to see a man and a merchant locked in an argument. A clay jug has been dropped, shattered, and both men are red-faced, screaming in Akkadian. A small crowd forms, buzzing with anticipation. This is the ancient version of viral drama. Then, out of nowhere, a city official appears. You know he's official because his robe is cleaner than everyone else's, and he's carrying a wooden staff with a carved lion's head. He doesn't yell, he doesn't even frown. He simply asks a question, listens to a few witnesses, and then points to the man who dropped the jar. Within seconds, 2 guards move in. One pulls out a small whip. The other grabs the man's hand and forces it down onto a flat stone. You realize with a rising chill that this is the moment. Hammurabi's code in action. Historians still argue how often these punishments were truly enforced. Were they literal or more symbolic? Were there fines, warnings, appeals? But today, in this moment, there's no doubt. The merchant mutters something, and the whip holder nods. The punishment is chosen. There's no judge, no jury, no lengthy trial. Just the codand, a very public reminder that Babylon does not play around with property damage. The man whimpers as he's led away, hand still intact, but clearly facing a painful future. The crowd disperses as quickly as it gathered, shrugging like this happens every other Tuesday, which, honestly, it probably does. You back away, feeling a little nauseous, not just from the spectacle, but from the realization that here your actions don't have consequences, they have punishments, and your accidental tripping or borrowing someone's bread, that might count. You try to remember what you've heard about Hammurabi's famous legal code, 282 laws, etched onto a black stone stele, stuff like an eye for an eye, sure, but also incredibly specific rules about oxen, dowries, and medical malpractice. Did you know a doctor who kills a patient during surgery has to lose a hand? Not great if you're into second chances. Oh, and if you accuse someone falsely, there's a law for that, too. False accusers can be drowned, whipped, or fined, depending on the mood of the day and the status of the people involved. You take a mental note. Do not accuse anyone of anything, even if you see them drop a baby into a fruit cart. Just smile and back away. Trying to avoid more legal entanglements, you duck into a quieter lane, hoping for some peace. That's when you get hit in the chest with a sack of barley. It wasn't intentional. A pair of workers are hoisting grain sacks into a storage shed, and one slipped. Still, it knocks the wind out of you, and for a second, you just stand there, hugging your ribs and contemplating whether this day could possibly get worse. Spoiler, it can. A woman nearby starts yelling at you. She's pointing at the grain. Did she think you dropped it? Is she accusing you of stealing? Oh no, 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 no. You try to protest. She doesn't care. People start gathering again. You raise your hands and slowly back away again. This time, no guards appear, but you hear someone say, "Scribe and temple," and you decide now's a good time to vanish. You squeeze through a gap between two stalls and find yourself in a back lane, thankfully devoid of people and drama. It's quiet. A goat eyes you suspiciously, but otherwise, it's peaceful. You lean against a wall, close your eyes, and try to catch your breath. This city is wearing you down, and it's not even noon. Your feet ache, your mouth is dry, and your nerves shot. Every corner hides a potential lawsuit or lynch mob. Babylon isn't just ancient. It's alive in ways your modern world has forgotten. Brutal, beautiful, breathtaking, and completely unforgiving. You start walking again, a little slower now, hugging the walls like a shadow. One thing is clear. This place doesn't suffer fools, and unfortunately, today, you are the fool. Your ribs still ache a little from the barley sack ambush, but your pride took the bigger hit. So now you walk with the wary gait of someone who knows full well that one wrong glance, one misstep, one accidental sneeze in a sacred zone could lead to a deeply unpleasant haircutter. Worse, a brief trial followed by permanent hand removal. You turn a corner, drawn by the low hum of voices and the rhythmic chanting of what sounds like priests or maybe enthusiastic tax collectors. Ahead, a small crowd gathers around a tall stone slab etched with lines of sharp, wedge-like symbols. A local scribe stands beside it, gesturing with flair as he reads aloud in Akkadian. You don't understand a word, but you do recognize drama when you see it. The crowd murmurs at certain phrases, and you catch the word hand again. You take 2 steps back, just in case it hits you. This is probably one of the public law stele replicas of Hammurabi's famous code displayed in public areas to remind everyone how not to get permanently maimed. You squint at the cuneiform script. It looks like someone tried to draw birds fighting with spears and then baked the whole thing in mud. Historians note that these laws weren't just about justice, they were about order. Hammurabi wanted to show that the gods favored his rule, that the king brought civilization to chaos, and you're walking chaos. A soft voice beside you says, "You can't read that, can you?" You jump. A young man in a long, patched tunic stands beside you, grinning. He's holding a basket of dates and an air of friendly mischief. "Didn't think so," he adds. "You look ... new." You attempt a smile, "Just visiting." He laughs. "From where?" "The sky." "Technically, not wrong." He introduces himself through a junior scribe in training. You're instantly grateful. Not just for the language bridge, but because Ru seems normal, like someone who might not report you for existing. You ask him carefully, what happens if you accidentally damage a merchant's goods? He shrugs. Depends. If it's an accident, you might just pay double. If the merchant's important, you might lose a hand. If the moon is in a bad phase, and the gods are cranky, well, maybe worse. Reassuring. You walk with him through the crowd as he casually explains Babylonian justice like it's neighborhood gossip. "That guy there," he whispers, nodding toward a man in elaborate robes, "accused someone of adultery last week. Didn't go well." "What happened?" "False accusation. Got his face branded." You blink. "Branded like with fire." Ru grins. "Welcome to Babylon." You try not to look horrified. As you walk, you spot a woman in distress. She's holding her arm, clearly bruised, while arguing with a man outside what looks like a small home. A temple guard approaches, calm and deliberate. The man protests. The woman insists. The guard pulls out a tablet and starts recording statements. Ru watches quietly. They're commoners. The temple court will decide. If it's domestic, the elders might call for a trial, by oath or by water. Trial by water. "Oh yes," he says, with a grim chuckle. "Sometimes they toss both parties into the canal. The one who survives without help is telling the truth." You stare at him. "That's legal." He shrugs. "The gods protect the innocent." Historians still debate how often such methods were actually used, or whether they were more ritual than real. But standing here now, watching a woman possibly plead her case to a god via near drowning, it doesn't feel metaphorical. You ask if Hammurabi himself enforced these punishments. Ru nods. He's long gone, but his laws remain, and everyone still fears them. Even the king now can't just make up justice. The law is etched in stone, literally. As if on cue, another official walks past with a guard, both holding clay tablets. They're probably off to enforce something unpleasant. Most people, Ru adds, just try not to be noticed. You nod. That part you're getting better at. But then you see it. A man, ragged and sunburned, slipping his hand into a fruit basket and sliding a pomegranate under his robe. The stall owner sees nothing. The thief walks away. triumphant. You freeze. Ru watches your expression. Let it go. But ... He stole that. Ru narrows his eyes. And if you report him, and you're wrong, you're in trouble. If you're right, he gets beaten in front of his children. Still want to be a hero? You don't. Not really. Not here. Justice in Babylon is as sharp and as heavy as a clay tablet to the face. Literal justice, literal weight, and it cuts in every direction. As Ru drifts away into the crowd, you stand for a moment longer beneath the blazing sun. You came looking for awe and wonder, and found a city wrapped in fear and consequence. Babylon doesn't just rule with lit breathes, it bleeds it, enforces it. Every brick you pass, every step you take, has already been decided by the ink-stained fingers of scribes and the unwavering grip of officials. And you're walking through a minefield written in cuneiform. The sun climbs higher, and your enthusiasm drops lower. You're parched, itchy, and possibly sunburned in places you didn't know could sunburn. Ru has vanished into the maze of alleyways and awnings, leaving you alone, a Genin anonymous face in a city that doesn't particularly care whether you live, die, or spontaneously combust into camel jerky. You shuffle toward what looks like a shaded plaza, where people seem to be speaking more calmly. It's a welcome change from all the shouting and cart dodging. But as you approach, you're stopped again by a man in uniform, bronze dagger at his hip, serious mustache, very little patience. He barks something at you in Akkadian, eyes narrowing as he looks at your confused face. You shrug and smile weakly. He tries again, slower this time, but louder. You catch a few words, district papers, and the unmistakable tone of "you don't belong here." And you don't, not just because of your lack of credentials, or your sandal situation, or the faint but persistent smell of mystery goat on your tunic. No, your biggest problem right now is that you simply can't talk to anyone, not clearly, not well, not in a way that keeps your arms attached to your torso. The language barrier is officially your worst enemy. In ancient Babylon, Akkadian is the dominant tongue-Semitic language spoken across Mesopotamia. But that's not all. There's also Sumerian, used in temple rituals and legal documents, and cuneiform. That's not a language, it's a script, and a complicated one at that. Imagine trying to text someone using 600 emojis, each one wedge-shaped and carved into a clay tablet the size of a sandwich. Historians still argue whether everyday people understood cuneiform or if it was reserved for the elite scribes and priests. But based on the wild look you're getting from this guard, you're definitely not elite. You try to mime that you're lost. He doesn't buy it. He waves over another man, this one wearing a temple sash and carrying a clay tablet. Great, you're about to be recorded for something. You're not sure what. In desperation, you point at yourself and say, slowly, south, from the ... south. Visiting uncle, traitor. It's a mess, an embarrassment, but it's something. The tablet guy raises an eyebrow. The guard sighs. They exchange words. Then, miraculously, they wave you off. You shuffle away before they can change their minds. That was too close, again, and it drives home the point. In Babylon, words are power. The people who read and write run the system. Scribes are like ancient rock stars, respected, trained from youth, and fluent in the coded language of bureaucracy. If you can't read a tablet, you don't get paid. If you can't write a contract, you don't own your land. If you can't speak the right dialect, you can't even apologize correctly. Suddenly, You hear a commotion behind you, sharp, hurried footsteps, and the sound of someone arguing in Akkadian. You duck into a small archway and find yourself inside a cool, dim structure. A public meeting hall, a school, a temple annex. Hard to say, but it's quiet, and no one's yelling, so you exhale. Inside, a row of young boys sits on reed mats, their fingers coated in clay, carefully pressing styluses into soft tablets. A stern, older man paces between them, occasionally muttering corrections or smacking a stick on the floor for attention. You've stumbled into a scribal school, and it's humbling. These kids, maybe 10, 12 years old, already better at navigating Babylon than you'll ever be. They know the laws, the rituals, the formulas. They'll grow up to be administrators, merchants, temple officials, gatekeepers of written power. You try to watch, quietly, unnoticed, but the instructor spots you and frowns. He walks over, peers at you closely, and says something in Sumerian, or maybe very formal Akkadian. Whatever it is, you don't respond fast enough. He holds up a clay tablet. Then he offers you a stylus. Oh no, now everyone's watching. You take it with trembling fingers and crouch next to a blank slab of clay. You press the stylus down and promptly snap the tip. The entire room erupts in laughter. One kid actually falls off his mat. You smile sheepishly, hand back the mangled stylus, and bow low. The teacher sighs and shoos you out. You can almost hear his thoughts. Stick to farming. Back on the street, your ego bruised and your fingers stained. You plod along toward the smell of something edible. But the truth is inescapable. Babylon is a literate world. Not in the way modern society is, with posters and menus and instructional labels, but in the sense that everything runs on documentation, debt records, marriage contracts, real estate exchanges, astrology predictions, medical prescriptions. They're all written on clay, in symbols you can't begin to decode. And if you can't read, you're vulnerable, powerless, dependent. You begin to understand why scribes were held in such high regard, not just for their knowledge, but for their sheer usefulness. If Babylon were a machine, the scribes were the ones holding the instruction manual, everyone else just pressing buttons and praying the thing doesn't explode. You sigh and glance at the sky. Still painfully bright, still no sign of food. But at least for Nono, one's trying to write your name on a clay warrant. Your stomach growls again, loudly. A nearby goat turns its head, as if insulted by the competition. You've now gone hours without a proper meal, and the odd Rutandran domestic diet you've been grazing on isn't cutting it. Time to find real food. But in Babylon, eating isnt as simple as popping into a diner or swinging by a 7-Eleven for a taquito. Here, the culinary experience is part ritual, part scavenger hunt, and part social negotiation, with a sprinkle of health hazard. You follow your nose again toward a bustling courtyard filled with noise and smoke. A cluster of makeshift stalls lines the edge, each manned by someone stirring, grinding, flipping, or yelling. You've found the ancient equivalent of a food court. It's loud, chaotic, and smells like onions, cumin, old oil, and the faintest whiff of hope. Your first stop, a man ladling a chunky stew from a pot so large it could double as a canoe. He eyes you warily, then gestures toward a hanging token board with small clay markers. You realize this place doesn't take coins, it runs on grain. In Babylon, silver shekels were used, but so was barley, especially among the working class. If you want food, you trade something of value. And right now, you don't have any value in, lest someone's hungry for awkwardness and cultural confusion. The stew vendor sighs and shoos you away, mumbling something about foreigners and empty hands. You keep walking, trying not to look too pitiful. A young girl offers you what looks like a flatbread with some kind of paste smeared on it. It smells ... okay. You pantomime thanks, reach for it, and she snatches it back. 3 handfuls, she says firmly. You stare at her blankly. A bystander translates, barley, 3, or goat's milk. You pat your sides like someone searching for pockets that never existed. No barley, no milk, just sweat, dust, and a mounting sense of dietary doom. A kind-looking old woman takes pity on you and offers a small bowl of pottage. You nod eagerly. She places it into your hands and holds out hers. Work, she says. Ah, the barter system. Soon enough, you're sweeping the front of her stall with a bundle of twigs tied with twine. You pretend it's a workout. She chuckles as you huff your way through Babylon's version of community service. But when you finish, she rewards you with a chunk of bread and the watery remnants of lentil stew. You eat like a king, a very, very sad king. Still, it's food, actual Babylonian cuisine, in fact. Historians know they had recipes for stews, breads, dried fish, dates, onions, garlic, and beer. Lots of beer. You see people sipping it from shared clay jars, using long, straws-thick, cloudy brews made from fermented barley. Less IPA, more ancient porridge. Someone offers you a cup. You accept, sip, and immediately cough. It tastes like warm, bitter oatmeal that's given up on life. But calories are calories. As you sit in the shade of the food court, trying to digest what might have been lentils and might have been pebbles, you overhear a group of merchants talking. One is bragging about his last feast: honey-glazed locusts, lamb cooked in pomegranate sauce, even wine from the mountains. So clearly, the rich eat differently. Historians note that elite Babylonian cuisine was elaborate. Banquets for priests and nobles featured everything from roasted duck to delicately seasoned vegetables, with spices like coriander, garlic, mint, and saffron. Of course, you're not invited to any of those parties. You're lucky if your bread isn't stale enough to qualify as construction material. Suddenly, a tall man stumbles into the food court, gasping and clutching his belly. Everyone pauses. Poison, he groans, then drops to his knees. Immediately, the crowd parts. A woman screams. Someone yells for a temple healer. A few curious onlookers whisper. You hear phrases like bad fish and improper sacrifice. And then the real kicker. He offended the goddess Gula. Here we go. In Babylon, medicine is a blurry line between science and sorcery. If your belly hurts, maybe it's bad stew, or maybe a demon got in through your ear. Either way, the cure involves a healer, an incantation, and probably a goose feather soaked in oil. Historians still argue whether Babylonian medicine was effective or mostly ceremonial. We do know they used real herbs, mustard, licorice root, murand, performed surgeries, even stitching wounds. But they also blamed illnesses on divine punishment and employed exorcists right alongside physicians. You watch as a healer arrives. He waves incense over the collapsed man, chants a prayer to Gula, goddess of healing, and then rubs a foul-smelling paste on the man's stomach. There's spitting, there's gesturing. At one point, a dog is brought in and made to sit next to the patient. It's unclear whether the dog is part of the ritual or just confused. Honestly, you feel the same way. Eventually, the man groans, rolls over, and announces he feels less cursed. The healer nods solemnly and accepts a handful of silver rings. Just another Tuesday. You slowly stand up. Your own stomach is gurgling, not in pain, just in protest. Whatever was in that stew, it's staging a rebellion. You leave the food court, moving cautiously, belly first. You pass a small stall selling clay amulets, each etched with protective spells. One claims to banish belly demons. You consider buying it, but remember, you're still operating on a budget of 0. Still, you can't help but wonder. In a city where sickness is spiritual and food is an experiment, maybe the best survival tactic is belief itself. You burp quietly. The goat from earlier reappears, still judging. You bow to it slightly, as if acknowledging a higher authority. Then you keep walking. The heat is relentless. By now, the Babylonian sun feels less like sunlight and more like a personal vendetta. You're sticky with sweat, drowsy from your meal, and dragging your feet along a dusty street that radiates heat like a grudge. Your face feels baked, your tunic clings like wet parchment, and your brain has been simmering in its own confusion stew for hours. So when you see a shaded courtyard with gently splashing water, you do what any sane person would. You bolt straight for it, arms outstretched, ready to splash your face and perhaps baptize your entire body in sweet, sweet relief. You get 2 steps in before someone screams at you. A small crowd gasps. A woman drops a basket of dates. A man shouts and starts waving a stick. You stop mid-stumble and realize your mistake. That's not a public fountain. That's a temple basin. You've just tried to wash your travel's sweaty face in water meant for ritual purification. Someone is already yelling something about defilement and malediction. Another person throws a pebble at your foot. A priest rushes over, flanked by 2 servants carrying incense and looking deeply unimpressed. You try to apologize, but it's too late. You've desecrated sacred space. Babylon was, above all, a religious city. And when we say religious, we don't mean go to the temple on weekends religious. We mean every moment of your life is monitored by gods, with long memories and specific preferences religious. Every building, transaction, and sneeze might require divine approval. Historians still debate whether the average Babylonian was truly devout or just constantly terrified. But based on the look the priest is giving you, fear definitely plays a role. The temple complex you're now being shooed away from likely belongs to Marduk, Babylon's patron deity. Marduk's temple tower, the Etemenanki, is the great ziggurat that looms over the city like a stack of divine pancakes, stretching skyward in layers of sun-baked brick and solemn importance. You glance up at it now, even from a distance, and feel a kind of vertigo. The structure is massive, multi-tiered, adorned with deep blue tiles and golden accents. Legend claims it inspired the Tower of Babel story. In person, it looks like something the gods themselves might have built on a creative weekend. And you just tried to wash your armpits in its sacred runoff. You shuffle away, sheepish and slightly damper than before, though not from water, just shame sweat. As penance or, maybe as an act of survival, you decide to actually learn something about these divine beings before accidentally angering another one. Babylonian religion is crowded. Over 300 named deities, each with their own personality, temple, feast days, and deeply specific demands. Marduk, the big guy, is the chief god of order and creation. Then there's Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and basically everything dramatic. And Lil controls storms. Ea handles wisdom and fresh water, and Gulari, remember her, does healing. But it's not just the gods themselves, it's the rituals. You pass a group of women preparing offerings, bowls of dates, bread, and what looks like a roasted bird arranged in careful symmetry. They murmur prayers, lighting incense made from imported resin that smells both spicy and solemn. Every offering is a contract, every gesture a negotiation. The gods are powerful, but they're also transactional. You give them cakes and praise, they maybe protect your crops or keep your husband from turning into a toad. You also learn mostly from eavesdropping that temples function like banks. People leave offerings as deposits. The temple lends them out. Scribes record it all. It's divine finance. So yes, even your hypothetical pomegranate theft might have violated religious and economic law. A 241 sign special. You stumble into a quieter, district quieter, but not calmer. Here, processions are forming. Drums thud, flutes trill. A group of men in elaborate garments begin chanting as they carry a statue of a god through the street. Onlookers bow, some weep, others throw flowers. You try to mimic whatever the guy next to you is doing. It turns out to be a deep, kneeling bow. Your knees crack like overcooked chickpeas. The statue, made of wood and gold leaf, glimmers as it passes. You catch a glimpse of the god's face, serene, wide-eyed, and oddly disapproving, as if aware you nearly face-planted in his sacred sink an hour ago. Religious life in Babylon isn't a part of the day is the day. Everything centers on the gods. Markets close for temple rituals. Workers pause for prayers. Even marriages require divine consultation via omens or liver readings. Yes, liver readings. A priest examines a sheep's liver like it's a horoscope made of meat. Historians still argue whether these rituals were believed sincerely or simply followed out of fear and tradition. But either way, people obey. Because the gods don't just punish, they vanish. If Marduk abandons the city, famine. If Ishtar gets ignored, war. If Gula is offended, disease. The gods are emotionally high maintenance and eternally on call. You round a corner and spot a man beating a drum rhythmically, while another pours water into a clay channel. They're cleansing the street before a priest walks down it. You scramble to move out of the way just in time to avoid holy foot traffic. You're learning, slowly, but still learning. Babylon demands reverence. And you just wanted to rinse your face. You've now perfected the art of walking like you belong lies. Forward, expression, neutral, arms loose, but not too loose. It's a delicate ballet of don't look, cat me energy. Still, you're paranoid enough to flinch whenever someone sneezes near you, shouts in your direction, or looks at your sandals. And let's talk about those sandals. They've suffered badly. One is trailing a frayed reed strap. The other keeps slapping the back of your heel like an overly affectionate fish. You keep telling yourself that ancient Babylon isn't about footwear fashion, but your blisters disagree. Loudly, still, you press on, because now you re-heading toward something you've heard whispers about all day. The Ishtar Gate. You don't even mean to. It just draws you in like a lighthouse made of lapis lazuli and sheer, unapologetic majesty. As you near it, the world changes, the noise fades, the crowd thins, even the air feels cooler, and then you see it. The gate rises ahead, like a portal to another realm, towering, impossibly blue, adorned with roaring lions and prancing bulls. It's a masterpiece of glazed brick and divine swagger, a monument not just to the goddess Ishtar, but to Babylon itself, to its pride, power, and architectural extraness. You stand there, neck craned, mouth slightly open. Tourists in the 21st century do this all the time. But here, in this century, you're lucky no one finds you for loitering like an awestruck idiot. The lions that line the processional weigh dozens of them, perfectly spaced seem to watch you. Their eyes fierce, their manes stylized, their golden fur shimmering in the midday light. The bulls and dragons on the gate itself are even more impressive. Historians still debate whether the dragons were symbolic, real animals misrepresented, or just Mesopotamian imagination run wild. Either way, they look like they mean business. You step forward, slowly, almost reverently, because here, finally, is something that feels like what you imagined ancient Babylon would be: glory, beauty, divine presence. And then a man bumps into you with a cart of bricks and yells, "Move, you statue, romance over." Turns out, the processional way is not a museum. It's a real road, and people have things to do. You hug the side of the avenue and keep moving along the walls. You notice official-looking clay tablets posted in recessed frames. Public announcements, maybe. Laws, temple notices, festival dates. You can't read a single line, but the people around you glance at them with the casual confidence of those who grew up in this city. You feel like a child, a Ganonli, this time. The sandbox is enormous and sacred, and the sand might be made of ground-up taxes. As you pass through the gate, you hear singing, not street music, not marketplace noise. This is choral, sacred. You follow the sound and discover a group of women draped in white, standing in a line and singing to Ishtar. Their voices rise in slow harmony, echoing off the glazed bricks. It's haunting, beautiful, and entirely alien. You don't understand the words, but you feel the emotion: devotion, longing, maybe even fear. Ishtar, goddess of love and war, isn't just a celestial hug. She's unpredictable, fierce, the kind of deity who blesses your child one day and curses your harvest the next. You watch in silence, then realize the ceremony is part of an ongoing festival. You remember what Rue said earlier: festivals shut down normal life, and suddenly you're surrounded again. Drums start. Dancers appear, men and women spinning, clapping, their movements sharp and repetitive. A man in a golden mask throws handfuls of flower petals. A priestess chants while sprinkling water on a small goat. You can't tell if it's symbolic, sacrificial, or just a really weird bath. Babylonian festivals were immersive, exhausting, and often mandatory. Religious holidays, like the Akichu, involved days of ritual, offerings, performances, and of course, parades. Historians still argue whether these festivals were joyful for the people or just another obligation. But watching the expressions around you, you see both joy and exhaustion, devotion and duty. Someone hands you a flower. You accept it like a sacred relic. Then a child darts past and smacks the flower out of your hand. The moment's gone. You try to blend into the crowd. At some point, a priest offers a blessing by touching each person's forehead with an herb bundle. You bow slightly and let it happen. A fine mist hits your brow, and for a second, you feel peaceful, even grateful. until the goat kicks over a bowl of incense and smoke blasts directly into your eyes. You stagger, eyes watering, and step straight into a tray of offerings. Bread, oil, maybe some dried fish shawl, now ruined under your very modern foot. A woman gasps. A man shouts. You freeze. A festival guard starts walking toward you. Your heart does that ancient dance called panic. But before he reaches you, someone grabs your elbow. Rue. Again, like a dusty, sarcastic guardian angel. Wrong tray, he mutters. Come on. He pulls you into the crowd, and you both disappear behind a group of drummers who smell like wine and sandalwood. Once safe, he laughs. You've got the timing of a cursed mule. Nice to see you, too, you mumble. Try not to offend any more gods today. You're running out. You can't tell if he's joking. He probably is. Probably. The sun is now less like a fireball and more like a personal vendetta from the god Shamash himself. You're sweating from pores you didn't know existed. Your sandals are practically steaming. And Rue, ever the optimist, has decided now is the perfect time to show you how the real Babylonians spend their afternoons. Come on, he says. You haven't seen the Canal District. You want to tell him that what you haven't seen is a bed, air conditioning, or a therapist, but you follow him anyway. Because at this point, resistance is just an extra calorie burn, and you're running low on those. The two of you weave through narrower streets now, where the air smells different, wetter, mustier, and fishier. You hear water before you see it. And then, there it is, one of the many canals that snake through Babylon, glistening like a lazy serpent under the blazing sky. The canals are the veins of the city. Babylon owes its life to water, not the flashy Euphrates itself, but this intricate web of engineered channels, carefully dug, managed, and maintained by entire crews of workers. Without them, the city would be toast. Literally, historians still argue. Rue says, casually, as he hops onto a footbridge, whether the canal system was more advanced than the Romans. We had it first, you know. Maybe not the arches, but the brains. He grins back at you, then points to a group of shirtless men hauling buckets of silt from the edge. See, irrigation maintenance, grimy work. No one thanks them. But if they stop, the whole neighborhood floods, the crops die, and the gods get mad. You watch as the workers move in rhythm, their feet planted in slippery mud, their bodies straining under the sun. It's backbreaking, labored on without complaint. Further along, you pass a washing area, not for clothes for people. A row of men are bathing in the canal, scrubbing with rough clay soap, their laughter echoing down the waterway. It seems oddly cheerful for something that looks borderline unsanitary. Then you see why. It's cool. You look down at your own arms, slick with dust, grime, and religious guilt, and hesitate. Jew notices. You want to bathe. Go ahead. Everyone does it. Just don't, drink the water. Unless you want a worm god living in your stomach. You're not sure if he's joking. Still, the temptation is real. You roll up your tunic and step in. It's glorious, muddy, questionable, and possibly cursed, but glorious. You crouch in the shallow water and splash your arms, neck, face. It's like peeling off a layer of suffering. Around you, a few others nod in your direction, maybe amused at the clumsy foreigner, but not unkind. Babylon's canals aren't just plumbing, they're lifelines. For irrigation, for bathing, for washing clothes, for transporting goods. Barges float by carrying sacks of grain, jars of oil, even passengers. It's a water-based freeway, minus the road rage. One barge is being pulled by a boy no older than 12. He waves. You wave back. He nearly hits a reed patch and curses in Sumerian. It's adorable. Some people even get married here, Rue says, gesturing downstream. You blink. In the canal. Beside it, sacred spot, fertility, blessing. Water means life, remember? You nod, trying not to think about the mysterious blob floating past your leg, probably just a spiritual fish. Further along, you see a group of women kneeling by the water, beating cloth against smooth stones. Laundry. Their hands are strong, their arms sun-bronzed, their movements mechanical. They chatter as they work, gossip, prayers, jokes about their husbands, probably. One of them yells something at you. You don't understand the words, but the tone is unmistakable. Get out of our wash zone, Rue laughs. That's your cue. You climb out, dripping and slightly reborn. The sun dries you in minutes. Walking again, you pass a clay tile-lined channel that runs off the main canal, feeding into a small orchard. Rue points it out proudly. Temple gardens. They grow figs, dates, melons, offerings for Marduk. You squint. Wait, so the gods get fresh fruit, but the rest of us eat gravel stew? He shrugs. They're gods. They get better perks. You notice that some homes have small irrigation ditches running into their yards, carefully rationed, controlled with reed gates. It's sophisticated, not slapdash. This city isn't just ancient, it's engineered. People think we're all mud and magic, Rue says, half to himself. But we had math. We measured land, forecast floods, scheduled harvests. You know how many people it takes to keep this all flowing? Too many, you mutter. He nods. Exactly. Historians sometimes downplay how advanced Mesopotamian hydrology was. But as you walk past these canals, functional, elegant, crucial, it's hard not to be impressed. Babylon isn't surviving despite the desert. It's thriving because it outsmarts it. Still, it's not without risks. Every few seasons, the canals flood, or clog, or carry disease. And when that happens, it's not just a plumbing issue. It's a citywide emergency. Temples close, crops drown, people panic. Water, the gift of the gods, becomes a curse. Last flood, Rue says. 3 winters ago, took out half the fish market. People were eating pickled radish for months. You grimace. You reach a shaded bridge and sit. A breeze flows down the canal. It smells of clay and algae and something slightly floral. It's peaceful. For once, you almost forget your ankles hurt. Rue tosses a pebble into the water. So, still glad you came. You give him a look. I was nearly arrested. Twice, maybe 3 times. I've been whipped with a twig, trampled by a goat, and I think my spleen is sunburned. He chuckles. But you saw Babylon. You pause. Yeah, I did. It's late afternoon now, and the color of the sky is beginning to mellow from blinding white to a dusty, burnt orange. The city breathes differently at this hour, slower, softer, as though Babylon itself is finally letting out a sigh after a long day of trade, prayers, and goat-related chaos. You and Rue move away from the canal district, your skin still damp and gritty from your bath, your legs a little less wobbly. The streets are calming. Even the ever-yelling vendors seem to have dropped their pitches by half a decibel. Shadows stretch long, stretching toward alleyways where the real soul of Babylon begins to whisper. Rue suddenly turns down a narrow path and gestures for you to follow. Time to meet the neighbors, he says. With a grin you've come to distrust slightly. You're entering a residential quarter, not the lavish estates of temple officials or wealthy merchants, but the living, breathing core of the city, the common folk. The houses are packed tightly, made from sun-dried mud brick, with flat rooftops and small wooden doors. Laundry flaps between homes on taut cords. Chickens wander freely. A goat looks like it's evaluating real estate options. You duck your head to enter one of the homes. No doorbell, just a clay knocker and a polite cough. Inside, the space is cool and dim. A single oil lamp flickers on a low table, casting dancing shadows across the simple furnishings. Reeds mats, a low brick oven, and a few shelves lined with ceramic bowls. The ceiling is low, the air thick with the scent of herbs and something vaguely doughy. Rue calls out, and a middle-aged woman appears, hands covered in flour. She eyes you for a long moment, then sighs and gestures for you to sit. "Welcome to my aunt's house," Rue says casually. "Try not to insult anyone. It's a high bar." You sit on a mat and smile awkwardly while the aunt continues kneading dough, muttering something about strays Rue drags home. Then a child appears, then another, then two more. Suddenly you're surrounded by curious eyes and sticky fingers. One pokes your arm, another tugs at your tunic. Rue shoos them gently. They've never seen anyone like you, or anyone this pale. You glance down. Yes, your skin tone does stand out. You're not quite ghostly, but next to these sun-bronzed children, you're practically a reflective surface. The aunt serves a small tray of flatbread, pickled vegetables, and a thick bean paste. It's humble, but smells comforting. You nod your thanks, take a bite, and, to your immense relief, it's delicious, salty, a bit sour, chewy, and exactly what your stomach wanted after a day of edible confusion. The children begin whispering to each other in rapid Akkadian. Drew chuckles. They re-betting on whether you a lost soldier or a priest in disguise. You look up from your bean paste. What did you tell them? He shrugs. That you came from the stars. You choke slightly on a pickle. You're not entirely lying, he adds. As the sun begins to dip, the rooftop becomes the new center of activity. You climb the stairs, more like a slanted ladder behind Rue, and emerge onto the roof. The view is breathtaking. The rooftops of Babylon stretch endlessly around you, broken only by the golden silhouette of the ziggurat in the distance, its top now catching the last of the day's sun. Neighbors are doing the same thing. Roofs are filling with people, sharing stories, eating, singing softly. A man plucks a lyre on the next house over. Someone else burns incense. It's a kind of communal exhale, the city shedding its harsh outer skin and revealing its tender insides. This, Rue says, is what we work for. It's quiet for a moment. Then he adds, "You won't see this part on the temple walls." You nod. The temple murals and public reliefs all show kings, gods, battles, parades. Nothing about the woman downstairs making bread with her elbow, or the children poking your ribs to see if you're real. Historians often argue about daily life in Babylon. We have contracts, tablets, administrative records, but not many diary entries. No Babylonian ever wrote, "Had a tough day, nearly stepped in goat dung again." And yet, standing here now, watching dusk settle over this rooftop city, you get it. This is the part that didn't make it into the records, but made the place real. The children begin singing a soft melody. It's rhythmic, repetitive, like a lullaby passed down from before the flood myths. Rue joins in quietly. You don't understand the words, but the tune sinks into your skin like warm oil. Down below, someone lights a clay lantern. Another begins cooking, again maybe second dinner, maybe a midnight snack. The city is quiet, but not asleep. Babylon doesn't really sleep. It dozes with one eye open and a hand on the water jar. You lie back on the rooftop, arms behind your head, staring up at the stars as they slowly prick through the darkening sky. No smog, no satellites, just pure velvet and light. A shooting star streaks overhead. Ru sees it too. Omen, he mutters. Good or bad, he grins. Depends who asks. A gust of wind rustles the drying herbs on a nearby line. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls, a baby cries, a priest begins chanting. A goat answers, probably yours. Babylon isn't just a city, it's a heartbeat. And for a moment, lying here, bellied with bean paste and sun-tired limbs, you don't feel entirely out of place. You wake to the sound of a rooster, or what you think is a rooster making a noise like it's gargling gravel. It's not exactly a gentle alarm clock, but in Babylon, this might be the luxury version. Your back is stiff from sleeping on sun-warmed bricks. Your tunic is crumpled and smells faintly of canal, and your mouth is drier than the royal wine cellar in a drought. The city is already stirring. Pots clink below. Children's feet thud against the floors. Someone is loudly arguing about lentils. Ru is already up, of course. You wolf it down without asking what's floating in it. Your stomach, apparently, has accepted Babylon's challenge. Today, he says, is Justice Day. You blink. Justice for what? For everyone, he shrugs. Disputes, theft, land squabbles, bad trades, broken engagements. This morning feels sharper, somehow more alert. Shopkeepers dust their goods. Scribes unroll fresh tablets. Soon you arrive at the city square, where a small platform stands at the center. On it, two men are already arguing loudly, while a stern figure robes, crisp beard, symmetrical sits behind a low desk. A few assistants crouch near his feet, furiously carving into clay. You've found a judge, not just any judge, either. And beside the platform stands a tall, dark pillar. You know this one. It's a replica stela of Hammurabi's Code, the famous If This Then That law book, carved centuries earlier, and still revered in Babylon as a legal and moral compass. You approach it and squint up at the dense, curling cuneiform. Somewhere up there, Hammurabi is probably still glaring at you. Ru leans in and whispers, still argue whether it was fair or just a fear tactic. He means historians, and he's right. Was the code about universal justice or social control? Either way, it worked. The neighbor claims the goat wandered. A child steps forward and testifies apparently quite confidently. The judge listens, strokes his beard, mutters something to a scribe. Then, the verdict. The goat thief owes 2 goats in return and a sack of dates. The audience murmurs its approval. The accused grumbles but nods. Another case. This time, a woman accuses a vendor of watering down his beer. The judge raises an eyebrow. There are gasps from the crowd. Watered down beer in Babylon. Ru mutters, that's practically treason. This case ends with the vendor being banned from the market for 3 days and forced. Then comes something stranger. A man accuses his wife of cursing him with a love spell that backfired. Yes, you heard that correctly. She denies it. But a priest is called to inspect a clay figurine found under their bed. The judge sighs. The priest examines it solemnly, but it's thorough. There are layers to a religious, social, economic. What seems laughable to you is deadly serious to them. Historians note that punishments varied wildly depending on class. Rue says something similar. Equality ends where the rings begin. Rings meaning silver, status, power. The final case you witness is grim. A builder is accused of constructing a house that collapsed, injuring a child. No one is laughing now. The judge listens. Eventually, the judge declares that the builder must rebuild the house at his own expense and offer daily meals to the family until it is done. No jail, no exile. Just a reminder. Build well or pay with more than coin. You glance at Rue. Is this what justice always looks like? He shrugs. Some days it's fair, some days it's theater. As the court disperses, the crowd begins discussing the decisions, debating loudly, swapping interpretations, telling friends what they would have done. It's part justice, part entertainment, and part public education. You walk away from the square, quiet for once. Babylon is many things. Hot, loud, complicated, divine, dusty. You catch it mid-fumble and hand it back. He grins, thanks you, and scampers off toward a scribe school. Justice, apparently, starts young here. The midday sun slathers Babylon in molten light again. The kind of heat that makes shadows seem like mirages and your spine feel like it's being slow roasted. You and Rue have left the court square behind, wading once more through the winding labyrinth of alleyways, rooftops, and low adobe walls. This time, Aru's heading toward what he calls the brains of the city. You almost ask if he means the palace. Surely the royal archives or treasury would qualify, but he shakes his head. Nope, better, the scribes' quarter. And sure enough, you soon find yourself in a completely different rhythm of Babylon. Gone is the clamor of fishmongers and metalworkers. Here, there's a strange hush punctuated by scratching styluses, muttering students, and the occasional frustrated sigh. You peek through an open archway and see them. Rows of young men crouched over clay tablets, their hands dusty with silt, eyes squinting in intense concentration. Some are copying economic records. Others are transcribing prayers. One poor soul appears to be practicing the same symbol over and over again, mumbling under his breath. Scribes are everything here, Rue explains. Bankers, priests, accountants, teachers, poets, historians. You want something written. They're the ones. You take a slow step into the space, trying not to knock over a jar or trip on a sleeping catwitch. There are surprisingly many of, lounging around like literary critics. One raises its head to blink at you, then returns to its nap. A young student scowls at his tablet. I wrote goat instead of tax, again. The instructor, an older man with a back like a question mark, walks over and sighs. Well, if the governor gets goats instead of taxes, you'll be writing apologies in the afterlife. The entire room groans in sympathetic pain. Scribe school isn't exactly a playground. You sit in a corner while Rue greets someone, an old friend, apparently. The friend offers you a stylus and a lump of clay. Wanna try? You shrug. Sure, what could go wrong? Turns out, everything. The stylus feels like a twig dipped in glue. The clay is stickier than expected. And the symbols, oh gods, the symbols look like someone tried to draw ants doing yoga. You press too hard, the clay cracks. You wipe it, smear, Try again. Accidentally write cowbelly instead of good fortune. The scribe laughs. Don't worry. Half the city can't read either. That's the thing. Babylon is literate, sort of. Not in the modern everyone reads novels on the tram sense, but in the elite professional class handles all your reading for you sense. Most people don't need to write. They memorize. They rely on scribes who have trained for years to do the heavy lifting. Historians still argue whether this made Babylonian society more efficient or more dependent. But one thing's clear. If you needed a contract, a prayer, or even a recipe, you didn't grab a pen, you grabbed a scribe. Ero's friend hands you a small tablet with something already etched in. Wanna know what it says? You nod. It's a list of expenses for a temple kitchen: barley, onions, cumin, oil, beer, enough to feed 30 workers. You blink. You're telling me this is grocery list, more or less, signed and sealed. No excuses if someone forgets the onions. It's strangely humbling. You think of all the grand ideas associated with ancient civilizations' philosophy, astronomy, myth, and yet, here's a 3,000-year-old reminder that someone always had to track lunch. Later, another scribe shows you a different kind of tablet, this one filled with tiny star-like patterns. It's an astronomical chart based on lunar cycles, he says, predicting eclipses. Wait, you ask, you knew about eclipses? Of course. Why wouldn't we? He says this with a straight face while cradling a pigeon like it's a calculator. The Babylonians, you learn, were incredible observers of the sky. They tracked the movements of Venus, mapped constellations, predicted eclipses with stunning accuracy using basic math. Historians note that some of their methods were so precise they influenced Greek and Islamic astronomy centuries later. And yet, they also believed that a solar eclipse could mean the king would die. Knowledge is layered, Eru's friend says, scratching a cuneiform proverb onto a practice slab, just like clay. Practical, sacred, fearful, hopeful, all in one. You sit in silence, watching rows of students etch knowledge into little bricks of memory, most of which will be dried, stored, and never seen again unless a museum digs them up in 3,000 years, or unless you accidentally sit on one, which you do. A tiny crack splits the corner of a practice tablet, and the student gasps. "I'll fix it," you blurt, panicking. He waves you off. "No worries. It was a failed love poem anyway." Of course it was. Later, as the sun begins its slow descent, the scribes finish their lessons. Some roll their stiff shoulders. Others rinse their hands in clay basins. The mood shifts again, less academic, more social. Someone breaks out a flute. Someone else starts reading from a clay text aloud, the Epic of Gilgamesh, maybe, or a farmer's letter to his lazy son. You and Ru leave just as the laughter starts. He glances at you. You survived the scribes. Most people don't. I sat on poetry. That's better than what I did my first time. I called the teacher Goatface by accident. Took me 2 years to live it down. You smile as you walk through the golden hush of late afternoon. Babylon's brain, it turns out, is messy, brilliant, and far more entertaining than you expected. You wonder how many stories were written today, and how many were never meant to be read again. You're starting to get cocky. After a full day of not dying, not being arrested, and only mildly offending a few ancient school children, you begin to feel like maybe, just maybe, you've got this Babylon thing figured out. That's cute, because Ru, clearly sensing your misplaced confidence, turns to you and says, "Ready to see what really makes Babylon run. You pause mid-step. We already saw the canals, the courts, the scribes. What's left? He smirks. The markets. Ah, right, the markets. You expected noise. You expected crowds. You even expected a few flying chickens. What you did not expect was the sensory onslaught that hits you the moment you turn the corner into the main bazaar. It's chaos, choreographed to the beat of ancient commerce. Voices shout from every direction, vendors hawking cloth, fish, perfume, baskets, beads, dates, reeds, and a few things you can't even identify. It's not just sound, it's smell, too. The air is thick with the scent of roasted onions, sweat, dried fruit, saffron, and possibly goat hooves. The last one might be literal. The street is packed with stalls, simple wooden frames covered in textiles, their tables overflowing with goods. Beneath your feet, clay bricks alternate with dusty patches where water has pooled. Children dart between legs. A dog noses a fig stand. Someone, somewhere, is singing badly. You're immediately overwhelmed, and then immediately grabbed. A cloth merchant loops a bolt of crimson fabric over your shoulder and starts explaining its quality in rapid Akkadian. You freeze, smile politely, and then try to gently peel it off, but it's too late. He's offered you 3 prices: a free pouch of cinnamon, and possibly a wife. Rue swoops in, says something sharp, and the merchant laughs, shrugs, and lets you go. Rule 1, Rue says. If you touch it, you're halfway to owning it. You keep your hands tucked firmly under your arms after that. Babylonian markets aren't organized the way you might expect. There's no zoning, no tidy rows of produce and pottery. It's more like a living organism. Stalls adapt, shift, sprawl wherever the crowd pulls them. A melon vendor and a coppersmith might be neighbors one day and relocated entirely the next. You pass through sections that seem loosely themed. One area has spices in woven baskets, cumin, coriander, turmeric, and something deep orange that makes you sneeze just by looking at it. Another is heavy with textiles, brilliant in color, indigos, ochres, pale greens. Most are dyed with natural substances, some even from crushed insects. Rue tells you this casually while draping a purple scarf across your head. You look like a foreign prince or a confused priest. You leave the scarf behind. The metalwork area is less pleasant, hot, clangy, with the smell of fire and oil. Workers hammer bronze into tools and weapons, sweat gleaming on their forearms. You marvel at the precision. One artisan is engraving a tiny lion on the hilt of a dagger barely the length of your hand. Historians still debate how much of Babylon's metallurgy was done in the city itself versus imported. But you can see clearly now, this is not a backwater town. This is a hub, a center. The Silk Road may not exist yet, but Babylon feels like its prototype. Rue pulls you toward another section. Now it's food. Oh, the food. Clay jars of pickled vegetables, skewers of grilled meat, baskets of freshly baked flatbread, warm and soft in the center. You watch as a woman deftly flips small fish over hot stones, adding a splash of lemony juice and herbs. You haven't even realized you were hungry again until your stomach growls audibly. Rue buys 2 skewers, hands you one, and leads you into a shady alcove near a fig vendor stall. You bite in sweet, salty, smoky whatever meat this is. It's better than 80% of your modern takeout. You don't ask too many questions about the source. As you eat, you observe the quiet economics at play. There's no paper money. Transactions happen with silver rings, small weights, or, if you're bartering, whatever you've got on hand. A woman offers a woven basket for 3 measures of lentils. A boy offers eggs in exchange for a new clay water jug. Every deal is a negotiation. Every price is fluid. Prices change depending on moon cycles, harvests, even omens, Rue explains. Saw a fish vendor charge double once because a comet passed the night before. You blink and people paid, he shrugs. Wouldn't you if you thought the gods were cranky? You see a scribe seated near the edge of the bazaar, inscribing a transaction onto a clay tablet. It's a contract for a bulk date purchase. Rue mentions that for large deals, especially among merchants or temples, things must be recorded. Otherwise, disputes turn into whole courtroom dramas. And speaking of drama, just as you're finishing your skewer, a loud argument breaks out between 2 men near a goat pen. You move closer, because of course you do and gather from Rue's whispered translation. The accused claims it was merely tired. The goat, lying on its side and bleeding like a hungover bard, seems to support the plaintiff's case. A small crowd forms. A young girl declares herself the judge. She bangs a stick on a rock, asks for witnesses, and everyone bursts into laughter. The fight dissipates. No goat tribunal today. As the sun begins to drop, golden light spills across the square, catching on bronze, reflecting in water jugs, deepening the blue of dyed fabrics. The market softens. Vendors begin to pack up. Deals wrap. Children are corralled. Dogs are shooed. The city, again, exhales. You and Rue head toward a quieter street, your senses still ringing from the assault of it all. Markets are messy, he says, but they tell you everything. Who's rich, who's poor, what's scarce, what's sacred, what people need, and what they'll pay for comfort. You nod, slowly. It's true. Babylon is not just built from bricks and laws. It's built from trade and taste and bargaining and the whisper of a good deal between strangers. It's alive in the clatter of coins, the glaze on a fig, the shouting, the singing, the salt rubbed into meat, and now a little bit in you. You should be tired. No, you are tired. Your legs ache like they've been swapped out for sun-dried reeds. Your brain hums with a soft, clay-dust static. You've absorbed a week's worth of sensory overload in a single day. But Babylon doesn't sleep just because you want to. And Ruru has plans. We've seen the outer skin, he says, as he leads you through an arched gateway into a quieter, more polished quarter of the city. Now it's time for the bones. You're too tired to argue. Also, slightly curious, because this area feels different. Gone are the crumbling bricks and noisy goats. Here, the streets are cleaner, the walls are higher. Lamps hang from iron brackets, casting soft orange pools on the path. The air smells faintly of cedar and crushed myrrh. This is where the priests live, Rue murmurs, and the astronomers, the top scribes, the dream interpreters, the ones who whisper into kings' ears and claim they read just reading the stars. Ah, the real Babylonian elite. You pass a temple library tall, quiet, guarded by 2 stone lions who stare through you like you owe them silver. Inside, you glimpse rows of clay shelves, each slot housing tablets like books. A few men in long robes shuffle silently, some hunched over in deep study. One murmurs what might be a spell or math. In Babylon, those two are rarely far apart. Historians still argue whether these priests were scientists or mystics, Rue says. Most were both. You duck into a nearby chamber. A wide, domed ceiling opens above you, painted with golden constellations that shimmer under oil lamps. The walls are carved with star charts, planetary cycles, and zigzagging lines that might be predictions or warnings. This is the observatory, Rue explains. You blink. You had observatories. He nods. What? You thought we just stared at clouds and guessed. He gestures to a high platform. A man stands there, arms folded behind his back, staring into the twilight. Watching Jupiter, Rue says, trying to see if it means war, or grain prices, or both. You climb the steps to join the man carefully, quietly. The view is breathtaking. The stars have emerged in full force, clear, unpolluted, brilliant. The crescent moon hangs above Babylon like a slow wink from the gods. Below, you can see the twinkling lamps of the ziggurat, the shadowed webs of the canal systems, and the distant flicker of fires in the common quarters. The astronomer doesn't speak, he just points. You follow his finger and see a bright star. Then another, then a slow-moving speck with a faint tail. A comet, you whisper. He nods solemnly. Marduk's breath. Could be change, could be drought. You glance at Rue, who whispers, don't ask for specifics. That'll cost you a whole goat. You step back down and explore more of the compound. The priests here don't just chant, they calculate, they memorize. They write dream manuals, yes, dream manuals, and what it means to dream of fish, or lions, or one's own feet turning to clay. Babylon had entire schools for this. In one courtyard, you pass a man whispering into the ear of a richly dressed woman. She nods, serious. You catch the word Mushasutha, mythical dragon-like creature from the Ishtar Gate. You wonder if this is a myth consultation or a diagnosis. Rue says quietly, people come here when their child is sick, or their wife stops singing, or their sheep won't eat. They get astrology, they get hope, he replies, wrapped in stars and incense. Would you ask questions if your brother was dying? You shake your head, not because you wouldn't but because you know what he means. Hope matters. You pass a chamber where a priestess writes with astonishing speed, clay tablets stacked like shortbread all around her. Her assistant translates dreams into cuneiform lines as she speaks. She looks at you once, raises an eyebrow, then returns to her tablet. Later, you find yourself standing in front of a large bronze basin filled with water. A priest drips oil onto its surface, watches the patterns, then nods and writes something down. Divination, Rue says. They say the gods whisper through ripples. Historians debate how seriously people took this, whether it was sincere, symbolic, or just social pressure. But watching it now, it feels sacred, deep, weighted. You realize Babylon doesn't just want order, it craves meaning. In the stars, in the dreams, in the oil slick of a bronze bowl. As the night deepens, the temple complex begins to quiet. Priests retire, doors are barred, lamps are dimmed. But above you, the stars keep blazing. You and Rue sit near the edge of the observatory again, legs dangling below. The city hums quieter now, but not silent. It never stops, you murmur. He nods. Cities don't, not really. You lean back, the chill of night finally replacing the daytime burn. Babylon at night is not what you expected. It's softer, stranger, still full of mystery, but not the threatening kind, the curious kind. the kind that makes you want to stay just a little longer. Despite the blisters, the language barrier, the mysterious goat fungus still tingling on your foot, ready to sleep, Ru asks. You yawn. Not quite. Because in Babylon, even sleep needs to be earned. You wake the next morning in a stranger's home again, a rooftop, wrapped in a borrowed woven blanket, with an unfamiliar cat purring on your chest like it owns the lease. Your muscles are sore in places that don't even have names anymore. Your mouth tastes like clay and grilled onion, and for a second you forget where or when you are. Then you hear it, a temple bell ringing out in the distance, followed by the soft, rising hum of morning chants. And just like that, you're back in Babylon. Today, Ru says, is your last full day in the city. He wants to show you something important. You try to guess an other market, a warehouse, the palace. No, he says, you've seen the mind of Babylon. Now it's time for the heart. And so you walk again, through tight alleys, past merchants brushing dust from their goods, children practicing writing in the dirt with sticks, a man scolding a goat who seems genuinely indifferent to authority. You pass a funeral procession's low quiet, the mourners draped in dark cloth, carrying incense and clay jars. The woman at the front sings a sorrowful melody that echoes faintly off the brick walls. Ru bows his head. It's a good day to remember the dead. You follow him through an archway into a garden you didn't know existed. This isn't the famous Hanging Gardens historians still debate if those were ever truly here in Babylon or just confused with Nineveh, but what you re-looking at is still breathtaking. A modest courtyard, walled off from the noise of the city, filled with greenery. Vines coil up trellises, date palms sway in the breeze. A trickling fountain gurgles gently in the center. Ru smiles. This is one of the temple healing gardens. Only priests and caretakers normally come here. But I told them you were a special case. You walked slowly, absorbing the scent of herbs, mint, coriander, something vaguely citrusy. This place smells alive. Unlike the rest of Babylon, with its heat and dust and sweat, this is calm, intentionally calm. You feel yourself exhale for the first time all day. A priestess greets you with a nod. She's older than Ru, with lines around her eyes and a voice like sand rubbed into velvet. She hands you a warm cloth soaked in something aromatic and gently presses it to your forehead. You don't know what it is. You also don't care. Sit, she says, gesturing to a stone bench. You sit. She speaks to Ru in low tones. He responds, then turns to you. She wants to know what your soul carries today. You hesitate. How do you answer that? That you've seen gods painted in lapis and blood. That you've eaten pickled fish beside palace walls. That you've bathed in a canal, survived a marketplace, and sat under stars older than empires. That your mind is overstretched, your skin sun-bitten, and your heart strangely full. I'm tired, you say. Ru translates. The priestess smiles. She steps back and begins preparing something, not magic medicine. She plucks herbs from nearby baskets, grinds them gently with a flat stone, pours oil into a dish, lights a thin braid of incense that smells like lavender mixed with hope. Historians often write about Babylon's innovations in math and astronomy, but they forget the medicine. Babylonian healers tracked symptoms. They knew to wash wounds. They cataloged herbs. They performed rudimentary surgeries. Some of it was spiritual, yes, but much of it was empirical. They even had diagnostic manuals, clay tablets, listing symptoms and their possible causes. One even describes epilepsy, calling it the hand of sin, the moon god. You wonder if they understood the brain better than we thought. The priestess hands you a small, warm drink. It's bitter, earthy, and calming. Your nerves begin to slow. Not everything here is punishment, Rue says softly. You nod. The priestess leads you through the garden, past inscriptions etched in old stone. Healing prayers, mantras, a few poems. One catches your eye. The gods may wound the flesh, but only love restores the spirit. You want to ask who wrote it, but something tells you the answer wouldn't fit in any museum label. You come to a shaded platform where a group of women chant in soft harmony. One plays a harp with only 5 strings. Another hums like wind over reeds. They're singing to the gods, yes, but also to the sick, to the tired, to anyone who just needs to feel heard. A child lies nearby, resting on her mother's lap, eyes closed, a cloth pressed to her brow. A clay tablet rests on her chest with the symbol for life etched deeply. Her fingers twitch in time with the music. You sit beside a potted fig tree and let the sound wash over you. Babylon has been brutal, but this is something else. A reminder that even the hardest cities hold corners of softness. Even the harshest empires make room for peace. Eventually, the priestess returns and hands you a small clay charms, a little disc, etched with what Rue says is a protection symbol. Keep it, he says, a souvenir. In case you forget, we weren't all trying to kill you. You smile, only most of you. The priestess bows her head. May your journey be long and your memories gentle. You stand. Thank her with the best imitation of a Babylonian bow you can manage. And as you step back into the city, its heat and noise waiting just beyond the garden gate, you feel something odd, not dread, not fear, but a strange, blooming affection for Babylon, for its cracked bricks and perfect stars, its cruel courts and healing chants, its gods and its goats. And for the first time, you think, maybe, just maybe, you could last one more day. By now, the rhythm of Babylon is in your bones. You know to sidestep puddles that aren't water. You've developed an instinct for dodging donkeys. You can spot a scribe from a shepherd at 10 paces. Your sandals feel more like part of your body than your own feet. But Rue still has one last trick up his linen sleeve. Ever seen the ziggurat up close? He asks, squinting toward the shimmering horizon. You pause, mid-date bite. We walked past it, he grins. Walking past isn't the same as climbing it. You nearly drop your date, because there it is, Edamananki, the house that is the foundation of heaven and earth. A structure so massive and iconic that it would echo through myth and scripture long after Babylon crumbles. Some scholars believe it inspired the story of the Tower of Babel. Others argue about its exact dimensions. Was it 300 feet tall? Was it finished? Was it more symbolic than practical? All you know is it's enormous. A square base stacked in ascending levels, like a giant staircase reaching for the gods. 7 layers. If the legends are right, each painted a different hue, from dusty brick to deep blue to gleaming white. You follow Rue to its base, where the foundation bricks are stamped over and over with the name of Nebuchadnezzar II, a king obsessed with rebuilding, with legacy, with being remembered. The first steps are simple, wide, even sun-warmed. But then the incline sharpens, the staircases get narrower, the air thins with heat, and your legs begin issuing quiet protests. Worried, Rue asks. Not even winded. Just planning my funeral inscription, you wheeze. At the second tier, you pause. The view is already staggering. The Euphrates curves like a silver snake in the distance. The canals shimmer like broken mirrors. Below you, Babylon hums, not as a noise, but as a presence, alive, immense. On the third tier, you pass a group of priests descending in single file. They nod as they pass, robes fluttering in the dry wind. One hums, softly, a chant you recognize from the healing garden. Is it always this quiet up here, you ask? Drew shakes his head. Not during festivals, but today. Just the wind and whatever gods are listening. He points upward. The top chambersome say that's where heaven and earth meet. Others say it's the god Marduk's bedchamber. Marduk has a bed. Don't ask what it's made of. Probably gold and very bad posture. By the fifth tier, you're drenched in sweat and panting like an overworked ox. But something in you insists on reaching the top. Not for glory, not even for the view, for understanding. At the sixth level, clouds start to feel closer than the street below. You look over your shoulder and realize you can no longer pick out individual people in the square-only specks and motion. And then, finally, the seventh tier. A flat platform surrounded by pillars, open to the sky. No roof, just wind, sun, and a dizzying sense of perspective. Rue steps aside to let you take it in. You stand at the edge, hands on the smooth stone, staring at the vastness of the plain beyond. The land stretches in all directions, beyond the river, beyond the farms, to where the earth seems to melt into the horizon. Here, Babylon feels infinite. You turn in a slow circle, soaking in every direction. The bustling canals to the east, the sacred temple complexes to the west, the royal palace gleaming in the north, and far off in the south, the flicker of campfires on the edge of the known world. This, Rue says quietly, is why people come here. Climb towers. No, he says, build civilizations. You sit, legs folded under you, a breeze tugging gently at your tunic. The air is cooler up here, the noise softened. Even your thoughts seem to echo differently. You ask Rue, did they really believe they were closer to the gods up here? He nods, but not just gods, to purpose, to the stars, to the place where things make sense. Historians debate the actual function of ziggurats. Were they symbolic, administrative, cosmic tuning forks, all of the above? But here, now, the answer feels obvious. It's perspective. From down below, Babylon is overwhelming, chaotic, unnavigable. But from up here, it's ordered, harmonious, like music carved in mud brick. You lean back, eyes closed, letting the sunlight burn patterns into your eyelids. You think of all the feet that climbed these stairs before you. High priests, soldiers, builders, royal astronomers, whispering predictions into copper tubes. And now you, a strange visitor from a time they couldn't begin to imagine, staring at a city they fought to build, block by block, chant by chant, law by law. As the sun begins its descent, the city starts to glow. Fires are lit, shadows stretch long. The river flickers with reflections like veins of gold. Rue stands beside you, silent. You don't speak. There's nothing left to say, because now you've seen it. Not just the ziggurat, not just the city, but the idea of Babylon, the impossible dream of man and God and mud and meaning. And somehow, impossibly, you feel a part of it. The descent from the ziggurat feels like returning from a dream. Each step downward draws you closer to the real world, again less divine insight, more sore knees, and the faint worry that your borrowed sandals are about to disintegrate. By the time your feet touch the base level, your calves are shaking like reeds in a storm. Ru claps you on the back. Not bad. Didn't fall, didn't offend any sky gods. That's a win. You laugh weakly. Unless Marduk sends me a bill later. He grins, then jerks his head toward a narrow lane. Time for one last stop. You've seen the courts, the markets, the towers. But there's one piece left. You follow without asking questions anymore. Babylon has taught you that asking questions often leads to more confusion and at least one fermented fish product. This part of the city is quieter, residential. You pass modest homes, some just a single room with a rooftop, others larger courtyards housing multiple families. A boy chases a hoop down the street. A woman calls to him with a chunk of honeyed bread in her hand. Then you hear it. Music. Not the stately chants of temples or the rhythmic percussion of ceremonies. This is something else, looser, playful, a reed flute, a plucked lyre. You and Ru follow the sound until you reach a small open-air gathering. This is not a temple, not a market, not official in any way. It's a courtyard concert. A group of musicians sits in a loose circle, their instruments glinting in the firelight. Lyres. A small audience surrounds them, neighbors, elders, children curled up in their mothers' laps. You sit near the back, and for the first time, no one stares. You're not a curiosity anymore, just another tired soul drawn to something warm and human. The music shifts through moods: joy, longing, celebration, even grief. You don't understand the lyrics, but you feel them. And when one old man starts a song with only his trough cracked and filled with memory, the crowd goes completely still. It's a lament, clearly, Ru whispers. It's about a lover lost in the canals during a flood. You shiver, not from cold, from the truth in it. It's also about people, their songs, their pain, their jokes, and bad teeth, and itchy tunics. Historians often reduce civilizations to their emperors, their wars, their tablets. But here, in this modest courtyard, you find the real Babylon, the one that doesn't make it onto museum plaques, the one where someone plays an off-key flute while his daughter twirls in circles to make the crowd laugh, where a woman hands you a bowl of roasted chickpeas with a wink and says, "Eat, stranger. You'll never be taller, but you can be wider." Where a dog with 3 legs but infinite confidence claims a spot near the fire like royalty. You learn a few things tonight, like how Babylonian jokes haven't aged well, but they were trying. One man tells a story about a lazy farmer, a stubborn ox, and a priest who accidentally blesses manure instead of bread. The crowd loses it. Ru groans and mutters, "They love that one." Or how storytelling here is fluid. Poems mix with myths, blend into family legends, and sometimes just turn into arguments halfway through. One young girl tries to recite the beginning of the Epic of Gilgamesh, but ends up turning it into a tale about her uncle's donkey. The musicians never stop. They trade off, improvising, clapping, drawing rhythm from pots and pebbles. A boy with a cracked drum keeps tempo with the enthusiasm of a festival procession. An elder nods slowly in approval. Historians still argue, Ru says with a quiet smile, whether music was religious first or recreational. You look around, maybe it was both all along, because in this moment it is sacred and silly, ritual and release. Later, a woman stands and tells a story, not sung, not shouted, just spoken. It's about her grandmother, who survived a fire, rebuilt her home, and started a tradition. Each year, on the fire's anniversary, she would make honey cakes and give them to children. Not to celebrate the fire, but to remember that she survived it. The woman chokes up near the end. Someone passes her a piece of cloth to wipe her eyes. You've never felt more human in an ancient city than you do right now. Afterward, the crowd begins to drift. Parents carry sleeping children. Musicians pack away instruments. The fire dwindles to embers. You and Rue sit for a while in silence. Then he speaks, voice low. Babylon isn't its towers, or laws, or kings. The people who lived here, who still do, in stories and songs. You sit a while longer, listening to the last notes fade into the dark. No fanfare, no chorus, just one final note, hanging like a thread between the stars and the bricks. And you finally understand. You wouldn't tea last a day in Babylon, not because it's brutal but because it's so deeply alive. You wake early, before the sun cracks open the horizon, with a strange heaviness in your chest. Not dread, not fatigue, something softer, a kind of sorrow wrapped in gratitude. It's your last morning in Babylon. Rue is already awake. He hands you a small, steaming cup of barley tea and says nothing, just gestures toward the rooftops. You follow him up the clay stairs, past the sleeping cat, past a line of drying herbs, to where the city unfolds in a silhouette. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the sky is beginning to glow like the gods are lighting it from beneath with golden coals. The rooftops gleam with dew. Smoke curls gently from cooking fires. Somewhere nearby, a rooster forgets how early it is and screams into the stillness. You sip your tea and watch the city stir. Sunrise is the only time Babylon ever really feels quiet, Rue whispers, like it's remembering itself. You nod, it's true. You think back through every step of your time here, the sticky markets, the cold canal bath, the courtroom theater, the healing garden, the ziggurat ascent, the music under the stars, and you feel something that surprises you. You don't want to leave, not just because it's fascinating or beautiful or ancient, but because, somehow, you've started to belong. Rue breaks the silence. Come on. There's someone I want you to meet. You follow him through narrow alleys, stepping over sleeping dogs and sweeping women, until you reach a wide courtyard filled with a strange clatterwood against stones. Voices raised in rhythmic timing and the occasional clang of metal. This, Rue says, is the labor yard. You raise an eyebrow. You brought me to work. He grins. Exactly. Because while Babylon has its palaces and temples and theories about the stars, it also has laborers, people who build and carry and haul and dig, and this yard is their domain. You step into the open space and are nearly run over by a cart full of bricks. Men and women move with purpose, carrying buckets of water, sharpening tools, measuring stone blocks with stretched cords. The rhythm is impressive, like a human machine made of sweat and calluses. Rue introduces you to a builder named Shalom. He's broad-shouldered, missing part of one eyebrow, and greets you with a nod that might mean hello or you better not slow me down. He hands you a trowel. Today, he says, you lay bricks. You blink. I don't know how. Good, he says. Then you can't do it wrong. Historians rarely talk about the laborers. They write about kings and taxes, wars and gods. But the city itself, the physical Babylon, was built by people like Shalom, by workers who rose with the sun, who shaped clay with their bare hands, who laid every single brick of every single wall. And you are about to experience exactly how unglamorous that is. You haul wet bricks from a wheelbarrow. You try to smear mud mortar onto a flat surface without dropping half of it on your foot. You accidentally build one corner slightly crooked and are gently, firmly told to knock it down and start again. Babylon doesn't need wobbly walls, Shalom says. That's what politicians are for. You snort, and he smirks. That counts as bonding. Hours pass. The sun rises and sears the courtyard. Your tunic clings to your back. Your arms ache. You have clay in your ears, and probably a bruise on your rib from a stray timber. But you build something, a wall. Just a low garden wall, but it stands, straight, solid. Shalom nods at it. Good, not beautiful, but strong. You take that as the highest compliment available. Later, you and the workers rest in the shade of a fig tree, passing around a jug of warm date wine and half-stale bread. One woman tells a story about a snake found in a grain jar. Another shares a rumor that the high priest sleeps with a goose for omens. Everyone laughs until they cough. These are the people who make the city work. They don't climb ziggurats, they don't write epics, but they carry Babylon on their backs, one brick at a time. You feel a strange honor being here with them. When you finally leave the yard, Rue claps you on the back. You smell like effort. I feel like dust in human form. He nods. Perfect. Now you're truly Babylonian. You smile even as your legs threaten to buckle, and you realize something profound. You wouldn't survive a day in Babylon, not because of violence, or disease, or the heat, or the law, but because it requires everything. Your body, your attention, your humility. Babylon doesn't just want to be visited, it demands to be joined. And for one brief, dusty, aching morning you did. The afternoon sun settles over Babylon like a golden weight, and the city begins to glow again, this time not with ambition or fury, but with the heavy softness of endings. Rue seems quieter now. You walk together along the canal's edge, the water shimmering like 1,000 discarded coins. Palm trees sway lazily. Fishermen mend their nets. A small boy paddles a carved boat with a stick, determined to conquer at least one corner of the river before dinner. There's a peace to it, not the sacred hush of the temples, not the murmuring reverence of the healing gardens. This is ordinary peace, the kind that happens when everyone's too tired to argue and too full to complain. You and Rue sit on a clay step near the water. He pulls something from his satchel, a thin piece of bark, hardened and smooth. Etched into it is a drawing very rough of a tower, a river, a tiny stick figure at the bottom, waving. You stare at it, confused. It's you, Rue says. You're Babylon. You should take something home. You smile, touched. Thank you. You'll forget half of this, he says quietly. Even the parts that felt unforgettable. Memory is slippery. You look down at the etching, then up at the city around you, the heat-hazed rooftops, the smell of spices and clay, the caw of distant birds. Maybe you say, but not all of it. You return to the main square one last time, passing the stalls, now closing for the day. The fig vendor waves. The boy from the ziggurat courtyard gives you a double thumbs up. and shout something that sounds like encouragement or mockery. Maybe both. The city has changed. Or maybe you have. You pass the same streets you walked on day one lane now. They feel familiar. You know which puddles to avoid. You know which corners will surprise you with the scent of roasted garlic. You know where the best views of the Ishtar Gate are. As you walk, you see a man carefully chiseling a clay tablet. You lean closer. It's not a law or a hymn or a cursed tablet, which, by the way, were a thing Babylonians would write nasty messages to the gods about their enemies and bury them in walls. No, this tablet is different. It's a letter. To my son, it begins. The chisel moves slowly, carefully, like each word is worth its weight in silver. You watch for a moment, transfixed. Rue whispers, "Some letters were never meant to be sent, just carved, preserved, witnessed." You think about that. Maybe Babylon isn't just a city of monuments and scribes. Maybe it's also a city of whispers carved into clay. Not for glory, not for gods, just so someone, someday, would know. You reach a tall wall where dozens of tablets have been embedded, like bricks, memorials, prayers, little windows into lives that mattered once and still do. You run your fingers over one. The symbols are worn, but the shape of them, the intention is still strong. Rue watches you, then says, "Ready?" You nod. But you're lying a little. You're not ready. Not to leave. Not to trade this textured, confusing, extraordinary city for modern asphalt and fluorescent lights and data plans. But time is slippery too. And Babylon moves, whether you're here or not. Rue walks with you to the edge of the city, where the dirt path fades into open fields. The sky is beginning to deepen now, blue melting into violet. He stops, turns to you. You came to see if you could last a day in Babylon. You nod. Well, he says, you didn't. You lived a day. That's more than most. You shake hands, then hug awkwardly, because you're covered in about 4 layers of dust and possibly still smell like goat cheese. You take one last look at the city, at the towers, the gates, the people, and you whisper something you're not sure you mean to say. Goodbye. Then you turn, walking slowly into the twilight. Your pocket is heavy with a drawing on bark. Your memory is heavier still, and behind you, Babylon bright, brilliant, brutal. Babylon keeps breathing, just as it always has, just as it always will. You walk into the twilight, with your feet dragging slightly, not from exhaustion anymore, but reluctance. There's something almost unfair about endings, how they sneak up on you just as the unfamiliar becomes cherished. You've spent your day in Babylon scraping clay from your fingers, dodging curses in the marketplace, whispering dreams into temple corridors, and sweating your soul up a ziggurat. And now it's just over. But of course, Babylon wouldn't care about your emotional timing. You find yourself circling back one final time to the place where it all began. The Ishtar Gate, its blue-glazed bricks, shimmer faintly in the fading light. The mythical beasts, dragons, lions, aurochs glow, gold against deep cobalt. It feels more alive than before, less imposing, more welcoming. You walk beneath it alone now. No crowds, no shouting merchants, no scribe narrating a king's ego. Just you and the beasts, standing sentinel to something greater than history. You stop halfway through. Lay your hand on one of the bricks. It's cool to the touch, and strangely smooth, like time itself has run its fingers across this same surface for centuries. You close your eyes, take a breath, and listen. Far in the distance, the soft rhythm of a drum echoes faint, steady, like a heartbeat stitched into the stones. Babylon is still moving. You open your eyes and see a small cluster of people lighting lamps at a shrine nearby. A woman sings as she lays down flowers. A man kisses the ground, then touches his forehead. A little girl leaves behind a scrap of fabric tied into a bow. They don't know you're watching, and somehow that makes it more beautiful. You step back, away from the gate, away from the noise, find a low wall to sit on, and you let it all replay. The fish stew, too spicy and suspicious. The sun-baked court, where justice meant fear and theater in equal measure. The boy who sang to himself in the brickyard. The priest who read dreams as if they were law. The woman who smeared oil on your brow like you were her own child. The stairway into the sky. Babylon has taken everything you thought you knew and stretched it until it sang. You never quite knew where you stood here, whether you were in danger or in ceremony or both, whether the next corner would reveal kindness or curses, whether the gods were watching or just napping. That's the magic of it. Historians still argue whether Babylon collapsed from overreach, invasion, climate change, or divine indifference. Maybe it was all of those, maybe none. But the city they write about, and the one UVE walked through today, not the same. Because this Babylon isn't just mud brick and myth, it's human, petty, majestic, tiring, tender, and it leaves a mark, not just on the land, on you. As night falls, you lie back against the wall, staring at the sky. The stars above Babylon are so clear they don't look real. Jupiter burns like a lantern. Orion lounges like a gossiping king. Somewhere to the east, the faint glow of Uruk flickers like a rival sibling. And you think you survived, barely, bruised, blistered, bewildered, but changed. Babylon didn't want you to last a day. It wanted to test your edges, to remind you that living here wasn't about comfort. It was about meaning, and now you belong to it just a little. Not in blood, not in name, but in memory, in clay, in stories. You stand up, brush the dust from your robe, and take one last walk through the gate, across the worn stones, past the walls that have seen too much and refuse to forget. And then you're gone. The city doesn't pause. Babylon continues, unconcerned. And somewhere, perhaps in the wind between the temples, the ghosts of scribes and singers whisper, "He came, he saw, he almost understood." You lie back now, still in the hush of imagined Babylon, letting your breath slow to the rhythm of a river that hasn't flowed for millennia. There's no need to move anymore. You've walked the entire city, watched dawn slip between ziggurat bricks, felt the pulse of ancient drums in your chest. You've heard secrets muttered in the shadows of healing gardens. You've tasted grief laced with cumin and cinnamon. You've survived trials, learned the shape of a forgotten alphabet, and pressed your palm to a gate meant for gods. Now, let it all fade. Let the sharp edges soften the heat, the noise, the uncertainty. Let it dissolve into evening mist and cool clay. Let yourself float just above those sun-warmed rooftops, where incense curls like smoke from a forgotten offering, and stars blink patiently in a sky unspoiled by time. You are not lost. You are exactly where you should be. In that sliver of space between memory and dream, where cities never truly fall and stories wait with open arms. So breathe, let the dust settle, let the river carry you. And if the ghosts of Babylon whisper once more tonight, don't be afraid, just listen. because they only speak to those who dared to walk their streets and lived if only for a day. Sleep well, traveler. Babylon will still be here, waiting in the silence. End of script. Sweet dreams.